Oh, quite a lot of DeFi enthusiasts around here, and always glad to see that. First of all, thank you for coming. My name is Nikola. It's a very common name in the DeFi Saver team, so we gave ourselves nicknames, and I ended up being a DeFi one. Anyway, today we are going to talk about latest developments in DeFi. To be more precise, we are going to cover perpetual futures and their inception in centralized exchanges, and then we're going to talk about their usage in the DeFi and talk about decentralized perpetual futures. After that, we are going to head to relatively new movement in DeFi, and that is Oracle free lending. We have already a couple of projects out there providing this kind of service, trying to shift the Oracle dependency from the core protocol to the users of the protocol, specifically in this case, the lenders. I'll talk more about that later. And the third topic about we're going to talk today is the leveraged ETH staking and how can you, let's say, boost your ETH staking APY. Okay, so first off are perpetual futures. I'm going to give a brief overview of what they are, and there is actually an interesting fact that they were first implemented in the cryptocurrency space. It was done by the BitMEX centralized exchange back in 2016. It's a new type of derivative, and it's a special version of the expirable futures because they have no expiry. And I'll try to give a short example and to break down how perpetual swaps or perpetual futures work. For example, let's say you don't have ETH and I don't have DAI, but let's just pretend that as if I have borrowed ETH from you and as if you have borrowed the same dollar amount of DAI from me. And let's pretend that the price of ETH has increased after we opened that position. That would mean that I experienced a loss and that you have experienced profit, because essentially I was the one shorting ETH and you were the one opening a long position, since you lent out ETH to me and borrowed DAI from me, and I did the opposite. The point here is that we can keep our position basically perpetually. What it means is that if our collateral, also known as margin, which we must deposit prior to opening a position, is lower than our loss, that position can be opened perpetually. Otherwise, your position would be basically liquidated. Why are we talking about perpetual futures now, and why it's a trend in the DeFi space? Well, I'll start with saying that in traditional finance, the market of derivatives is huge, and that is recently coming to the cryptocurrency space. It started firstly on centralized exchanges. For example, we can see that the average daily volume of derivatives on centralized exchanges is already 3 times the average daily volume on the spot market, on the top 10 centralized exchanges in their spot markets, and that's from 2022. Why is this? That is a good question, and the answer is pretty simple, actually. The perpetual futures are a type of derivative that offer very similar trading UX to the ones on the spot market, but with a way more higher leverage. So, because you are essentially not borrowing actual assets on perpetual futures, since they are derivatives, you are kind of borrowing the exposure to assets you're trading. So it's a bit different from the margin trading on the spot markets. Now, when we shift our attention to the DeFi space and talk about perpetual futures that are based on decentralized exchanges, we can see that they have also increased in volume in 2022 compared to 2021, and the growth has continued this year despite the bear market. The one thing that has changed, however, was that now we have various different protocols, decentralized leverage trading protocols that offer this kind of service. However, when we compare the volumes, the average volumes from DEXs versus the ones on centralized exchanges, we get that DEX derivatives account for only 1.5% of centralized exchange volume, while the share is closer to 8% on the spot markets. What question may arise is that what we can do to improve, to bring traders from, let's say, custodial solutions and centralized exchanges to the DeFi space, because it seems that being a non-custodial is not enough, at least so far. One of the solutions may be that we need to improve the trading UX along with the onboarding process. We may need to lower the trading costs, and this spectrum is in the, should I say, design space of DeFi lending protocols. We can introduce new features. We can offer wide range of assets user can trade in the DeFi space. Or if we take a look at this graph, the goal would be to move this optimal UX that we can find on centralized exchanges to the right-hand side, or should I say to the can-be evil side. Okay, the next topic is a pretty interesting movement recently in DeFi. There are protocols that emerged offering lending without the need for external price feeds. Now, the goal and the problem they try to solve is how to trigger liquidations in lending protocols without the need of external price feeds. One of the projects that managed to do that is Pawn Finance, and what they did is they offered expirable loans, which is not something we are used to see in the DeFi lending space. For example, Maker, Aave, Compound, Liquidity all have perpetual loans. Pawn Finance came and said, okay, the loans will be expirable, and the liquidations will only be possible after the expiry date. So nobody can liquidate any loan before that date. And I said, okay, if the liquidations are possible only from a certain date, we don't need oracles. The second solution is Blend. That's a short for Blur Lending. It's a protocol that the Blur team launched for their platform. Blur is an NFT marketplace, and they launched a lending protocol where you can put an NFT as a collateral and take out a loan in ETH. So you can, let's say, for example, buy another NFT with that ETH. And how they managed to shift the dependency from the protocol to the lenders is that they said, okay, liquidations are going to be can be triggered only by the lenders, by the ones who provide ETH as a liquidity. That can be done anytime, and here the important difference compared to the Pawn Finance is that loans are perpetual, just like we used to in DeFi. So they said, okay, if the lender comes and decides to withdraw his ETH, borrower gets some grace period to react, to either pay his loan back or to find another lender who would take the place of the previous one. So you can basically now maybe even see where this movement is going. So we are trying to do something very similar to what Uniswap V3 did with concentrated liquidity. They made a trade-off between making the process of liquidity provision and liquidity management a bit more complex in exchange for adding a new feature to the protocol or for upgrading the protocol. And the similar thing is happening here also. One good example of that is the next project I want to talk about, and that's Ajna Finance. They're yet to be launched, and it's a bit more complex than the previous two, since it has a variable liquidation price based on two parameters. I will not get into details, but the first parameter is called lowest utilized price, and the second one is called highest threshold price. And if the LUP falls below the HTP, basically anyone can liquidate loans in Ajna Finance. As I said, it's a bit more complex than the previous two ones. By the way, I wrote about Ajna in detail on Twitter, so if anyone is interested, you can check it out. Okay, so the third topic here would be probably the most popular DeFi strategy recently, especially after the Shanghai upgrade, when the withdrawals were enabled. In a couple of last months, we saw that liquid staking protocols like Lido or Rocket Pool saw an enormous growth in their TVL. One of the main reasons and contributor to that TVL is exactly the leveraged staking strategy, which resulted in Lido being one of the protocols with the highest TVL in the DeFi at the moment. So I'll try to explain why, how can you boost your ETH staking APY briefly, and why it can be useful compared to just holding some of the liquid staking tokens like staked ETH from Lido or RETH from Rocket Pool, which, let's say, for example, yields about 5 or 6% a year. The first step would be for each ETH, you can flash loan another 2 ETH, stake that free ETH with some liquid staking provider, let's say Lido, and then supply that staked ETH into one of the DeFi lending protocols, and borrow 2 ETH against it, use the 2 ETH to repay the flash loan. The result is a 3x leverage position, whose goal is to boost your APY. The question that arises is why, or maybe let's say, how is that boosted APY possible? The answer sits behind the fact that historically, ETH borrow rate in lending protocols was lower than the ETH staking yield. Keep in mind that both of those are variable. ETH borrow rate depends on the pool utilization of the protocol you are using, let's say Compound or Aave. And the staking APY, the ETH staking APY, depends on basically on the congestion and the usage of Ethereum network. Now in the market, there are various tools of making the process of opening and closing and managing the leveraged ETH staking position. There are tools for automated leverage management, automated liquidation protection, and also a one-click shifting, even the one-click shifting between the protocols, because maybe someone wants to shift their whole position to another protocols because they find out that another protocol has, for example, lower ETH borrow rate, or they simply want to switch to another liquid staking token. One of those tools is DeFi Saver, where you can find, choose between different liquid staking tokens. You can choose between what underlying protocols are you using under the hood, and you can even choose the network on which you want to open this kind of position, since lately layer 2 solutions also have enough liquidity so you can leverage the e-staking position on Aave free, for example. Yep, that would be it. Thank you all for listening. I'm open for any kind of questions. Yeah. Thank you. There's one. Yeah.
What do you think about the future of the perp taxes on other chains except Arbitrum?
I think layer 2 solutions have a bright future when it comes to designing and developing. That's a good question. Designing and developing decentralized perpetual futures, because we need high transaction throughput, we need lower trading fees, and I think with the layer 2 or even layer 3 solutions, we can offer that kind of service. So beside Arbitrum, Optimism and other ZK rollups can surely be the ones used for this kind of trading service and exchanges. Anyone else?
Can you please give a small comment on the last slide, like where you talked about leveraged staking? So if I understand correctly, DeFi Saver is more about infrastructure. So how do you implement the leverage part of this product? Do you have some connections, like some partnering protocols, or like, what about the leverage itself?
If I understand the question correctly, we are integrating and supporting the lending protocols by default, and we are using them to gain this leverage. It's let me check if I can go back. No, okay. What we are doing, we are essentially depositing staked ETH and borrowing ETH and sort of looping that to gain leverage. And users are the one choosing which protocols they want to use under the hood. We are just providing the interface users can utilize to do that, let's say, in one transaction, or to manage their positions easily. But they're sort of interacting with the lending protocols directly through our smart contracts. Okay.
Yeah, hi. Could you explain more about where risks for leverage staking come from?
Did you say the risk?
The risk, yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's a good question. The risks for leverage staking is that the liquid staking tokens can depeg because they rely on the on-chain liquidity, since the withdrawal of staked ETH is not an atomic operation. So you would need to, if you want to unwind your position, you would need to go to some decentralized exchange and basically sell your staked ETH to ETH. And it basically has a market price, which can depeg from the Ether. So I would say that is the main risk you are taking when opening that kind of position. But after the Shanghai upgrade, the DPEG risk, I think, has been lowered significantly than before the Shanghai upgrade. And I think that's the most important thing when if you are considering opening such position. Yeah.
Anyone else?
Yeah. Thanks.